This is ContactTalkRadio.com, consciousness in action, and you are taking action into your consciousness by tuning into Contact Talk Radio.
And on TuneIn.com, Hing.fm, and UpSnap Mobile.
Contact Talk Radio.
Long ago, before this day's confusion did begin, throughout the stars did we go wandering. Distance was no barrier, and time it had no hope. Free to come and free to go. Free to come and free to go. Open up the book of stars.
Hello everyone and welcome to Karmic Evolution's Astrologically Speaking. I'm your host, Sherry Horn Hassan of Karmic Evolution Astrology, coming to you on June 10th, 2021 from Contact Talk Radio. Just a quick reminder that this show aims to bring you the truth about astrology and your soul's karmic evolution. I'm pleased to announce that my guest today is again professional astrologer Elizabeth HAZEL, who I will of course be introducing properly in just a few moments. But first, my usual housekeeping stuff, which I'm going to try to keep brief because I have some long remarks and I don't want to cut into Liz's interview. So please remember that you can go to my Facebook page for my posts. You can access this show live or the recorded archived recordings at karmicevolution.com. Facebook page is Karmic Evolution for Your Soul, and that you can sign up on my Facebook page for my Conversations About Consciousness email newsletter. So if you've missed any shows, you can always go to karmicevolution.com, hit radio show in the upper right-hand corner of the banner, and scroll down and find all of the archived recordings. In addition, I'm continuing to offer my discounted 1-hour Karmic Evolution Natal Insight reading to my listeners for only $99. So if you're interested in gaining greater consciousness about your soul's true mission and purpose in this lifetime, if you're seeking to move from chaos to clarity in a particular area in your life, your relationships, your career, your finances, your health, and to heal old karmic wounds and co-create your own future happiness and success by awakening to your true potential and highest destiny in this lifetime, well, it's a mouthful, but it's easy when you take advantage of my special discounted offer for listeners. Again, that's a 1-hour Karmic Evolution Natal Insight reading for only $99. Simply email me at Sherry, that's SHERI, at karmicevolution.com and book your reading today. At almost half the regular price, conscious awareness has never been so easy or so affordable. So now I would like to get on to this week's Astro news you can use. So the big news this week is today's Gemini New Moon solar eclipse, which occurred at 3:53 a.m. Pacific time and 6:53 a.m. Eastern time at 19 degrees 47 minutes of the archetypal sign representing our mental thought processes and how they form the basis of our higher level beliefs, philosophies, and what allows us, basically the beliefs and philosophies of life allow us to grow in consciousness, at least in theory. Now, Mercury's Gemini is, well, mercurial in nature, meaning in addition to its mutable, changeable nature, it's an archetypal sign that's capable of great eloquence, ingenuity, and yes, both mental and physical sleights of hand. Mercury represents pairs, and in doing so, it represents our hands. So, the sleight of hand tricks that people do with cards and shell games and things like that is part of the Geminian archetype. Now, while the downside of the Gemini archetype may manifest as fickle, fluctuating, capricious, inconsistent, unpredictable, and even at times unstable, when we look at it through a more positive lens, we see how these attributes can morph into a kind of higher eloquence and ingenuity for which this archetype is often known. So let's call it mental acuity, rapid thought processes and the ability to absorb information quickly and turn on a dime, and the gift of gab. In other words, Geminian energy operates as curious, inquisitive, and loquacious, and it's these traits that form the foundation of the Geminian need for constant change as a way to continually learn. Taking in and acting on new information helps keep the Gemini archetype from becoming bored, which is like death to those of this archetypal persuasion. So this Gemini New Moon solar eclipse is meant to stimulate us into a more rapid thought process whereby we may learn and incorporate new information and ideas into our psyches now. And this is especially true since both the Gemini Moon and Sun conjoined Mercury shortly after the exact lunation. The Gemini Moon conjoined Mercury right after the lunation, within like a couple hours, and the Gemini Sun will follow with its conjoining of Mercury later this evening. So these aspects may confer upon us a rapid exchange of ideas, especially leading up to this lunation and eclipse, right? Because the energy culminates now, which doesn't mean that we don't experience it after the fact, but it's at its height as we come to the actual exact aspects. So these kind of aspects confer upon us a rapid exchange, the ability to make a rapid exchange of ideas with others, during which we may share our personal experiences and stories and our points of view. So it's an excellent time for planting a seed that may germinate into potentially profitable business idea and or for initiating new ventures, including this business ventures. It's a good time to write also. So I just want to throw that out there since Gemini is a bit of the scribe, right? Now, insights around such imaginative ideas that come to us are what may have actually been eclipsed up until now. And it's this eclipse that brings, or solar eclipse, that's bringing it into consciousness, or bringing into consciousness what's formerly been hidden in the deeper recesses of our psyches now. So revelations may always occur leading up to, during, or following eclipses, especially when we consider that a pair or sometimes a trio of eclipses occurs close together. Now, I want to mention that although the energy had already completed its aspect or its exact aspect, some of this is related to the Mars-Pluto opposition that occurred already on June 5th, right? So that energy culminated then, but it still might have triggered something. And the reason I mention it is because that's an aspect for huge empowerment or self-empowerment. And I had planned to talk about that a little bit later here, but I'm just quickly rearranging my thoughts, because when we get revelations and ideas, right, we have to make sure that we can manifest them into concrete reality. So in order to do that, we have to feel empowered enough to be able to carry that out. All right. So I'll talk more about that in a little bit, but I just want to mention that here. Now, eclipses in general run in series, and they recur roughly every 19 years in tandem with the transiting karmic nodal cycles, which move through a different set of houses in our individual natal charts approximately every 19 months or so. According to renowned astrologer Bernadette Brady, who studied and categorized both the dates and meanings of these eclipse cycles, which are known as the Saros cycle series, this latest set of eclipses, which includes the Sagittarius full moon lunar eclipse of May 26th, are part of the Saros cycle series 5 North. Now, her description of this particular eclipse series, drawn from her book Predictive Astrology, The Eagle and the Lark, reads as follows, quote, "A very unusual Saros series involving sudden flashes of ideas that seem to have a psychic or unconscious flavor to them. Hunches, visions, prophetic dreams are the essence of this family of eclipses, a truly creative series which should leave the individual enriched. The ideas and hunches which come from this eclipse can be acted upon." Wow! Like, what could be better than that, right? However, here's both the potential problem and the potential solution all rolled into one at this time, depending. Both luminaries and Mercury, which all conjoin, were waxing towards squares to Neptune in Pisces at this lunation. And while the moon perfected her square to Neptune just after the exact lunation eclipse, the sun doesn't complete its exact square until June 19th. So in a nutshell, this means that clarity around our ideas and plans can come to us intuitively, but also be marred by wishful instead of practical thinking now. And to avoid this as a way to bridge the gap between our idealism or our fantastical longings or our wishful thinking and actual factual concrete reality of manifestation, we're tasked with rising above the mundane world now through meditative, creative, and other metaphysical endeavors. It's through our intuitive insights that not only fantastical possibilities may be revealed, but also practical solutions to make them, eventually manifest concretely. Dreams can come to reality as long as they're not so high in the sky that we can never lasso them down to earth. Longing for something doesn't make it happen. And believing concrete manifestation is possible without a plan is a form of self-deceit. So any self-deceit now will probably manifest through the deceit of others, as this basically is an illustration. Anybody who tries to deceive us now illustrates back to us the mirror image externally of what's going on internally. So beware, and I've said this before, I use this phrase a lot when I'm talking about Neptune or squares to Neptune, especially with Mercury and the sun. Beware that all that glitters is not gold, and try to capture inspirational dreams now, but also to understand that we have to prove they can come true, else they are doomed to fail. This is if we build it, it's not necessarily true that they will come, right? And above all, because when the sun squares Neptune between now and the 13th, it is possible our energy may flag or waver a little. We may get a little not depressed or a little discouraged, right? So if we don't let discouragement waylay us, we can take the assurance of this particular eclipse to understand, particularly since it's shortly after the Mars opposition to Pluto, which challenged us to latch on to things that make us feel more empowered internally, that we're on the road to success. Now, Mercury, which already squared Neptune for the second time during his current retrograde journey on June 5th, and won't come back for a third and final hit until July 6th, which is after his June 22nd station direct. And also at that time, when he does make that final hit on July 6th, Neptune will be retrograde. So now it's Mercury retrograde square Neptune direct, and then it will be Mercury direct square Neptune retrograde, right? Because Neptune will begin his retrograde motion on June 25th. So between now and the sun's exact square to Neptune on June 13th, if we're cognizant that this is an excellent time to review new insights and ideas, particularly those related to communication, business, and future plans, let's remember also that Saturn's retrograde now in Aquarius until October 10th. And that reminds us to review, along with Mercury's current retrograde, to review, rethink, revise, and redo any plans that revolve around building a firmer foundation for our inner security, which is what Saturn's retrograde is about, and our inner sense of empowerment, which is what the recent Mars-Pluto opposition was about. We may find faults in our foundational beliefs during this period that need rethinking or reworking. In short, however, combined with this Gemini New Moon solar eclipse, we may use our insights and revelations to build a firmer foundation upon which our new ideas and plans may find healthier, more fertile soil so that they may successfully bloom and blossom down the road. Now, also at this lunation, Venus in Cancer waxes toward an exact square to wounded healer Chiron in Taurus, which perfects on June 12th, indicating that inner resistance to changing the way we perceive and value ourselves is of utmost importance now. And that is also part of the road to greater inner self-empowerment. When insights and revelations arise from the depths of our soul, aided by our connection to the divine realm, do we dismiss them? Or worse yet, denigrate them through habitual feelings of inadequacy? Or will we use Venus in Cancer's sextile to Uranus and Taurus shortly after on June 12th to allow us to break with old habits of undervaluating our own ideas, revelations, and aha moments as virtually impossible? Will we remain stuck in the past and resistant to such a change, or open to a new way? So insights may also arrive during social interactions with friends, family. I mean, Venus is in Cancer after all. Acquaintances, colleagues, neighbors, etc. Our interactions will be more charged with excitement, albeit probably, more of a temporary state. However, what's exchanged now may also spark more revelations down the line. And although Mars in Cancer opposed Pluto, oh yeah, I was talking about that. So I kind of, what I want to say about that, if we think back about a week or so to when that aspect perfected, which was on June 5th, 5 days ago, I guess it was, we can ask ourselves now, where did I feel the fear and decide to do it anyway? Did I face a confrontation and perhaps with the help of others stand my ground and emerge victorious? Or did I decide it's not worth it and walk away? And as a result of either path, have I felt an inner sense of strength and the ensuing knowledge that something inside has led me to feel more powerful, like for real? So no matter the scenario, the point of this powerful opposition was to help us strengthen our sense of inner self-empowerment, as I've said a couple times now, and that, my friends, is part of our evolutionary process as souls on this current journey. Now, Mars moves into proud, creative, solar-oriented Leo on June 11th, leading up to Venus's square to Chiron and sextile to Uranus, which I already mentioned, and the Sun's exact square to Neptune, all of which will culminate by June 13th. So between now and then, we can use Mars energy to bravely move forward with any newly found inner empowerment, to courageously share and discuss our ideas and plans with others. And we can remember that Mars' mission is always to support our sun to be able to shine in the best and healthiest way possible. Now, finally, we have the second exact square of Saturn to Aquarius, Saturn in Aquarius to Uranus and Taurus on June 14. Now, it's interesting. We're going to talk about that with our guests, but I noticed that the U.S. FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, approved a new Alzheimer's drug designed to slow the progression of a disease affecting millions of mostly elderly people. And this approval came through on June 7th, before this eclipse. And it would seem to be the same kind of medical breakthrough as the COVID-19 vaccines were, whereby we set a foundational humanitarian goal or plan through a super speedy FDA accelerated approval process. Both the drugs for COVID-19 and this one for Alzheimer's were accelerated. So Uranus and Taurus help change our values about expediting a potential medical lifesaver for some. And this in turn harks back, in both cases, to dealing with the pandemic and dealing with this Alzheimer's drug, to the Venus in Cancer, which is about valuing our family members, and it's square to Chiron and Aries. So it's important to us to value the family members, and in doing so, to help them heal their wounds, to express or to think clearly for themselves through potential opportunities, Venus sextile Uranus, to slow, like I said, the progression of both the COVID-19 spread and of this Alzheimer's disease. And then we have the recent announcement by the Biden administration, just yesterday, I believe, to purchase millions of vaccine doses to distribute to the citizens of other countries. So, it's just interesting that to look at this pending Venus square, Saturn in Aquarius square to Uranus and Taurus, which is going to perfect for the second time this year. The next and last square will occur in December. But to show us how far we've come from the first square, which was in February, which was basically pretty much when the vaccine really started getting rolled out and the Biden administration was fairly newly inaugurated and gave us the structure and foundational ability to get these vaccines distributed very, very quickly as, of course, a humanitarian gesture. All right, so we're going to talk about more of this stuff, and I want to welcome now my guest today, Elizabeth HAZEL. Elizabeth HAZEL is a professional astrologer, tarotist, and author. She released The Little Book of Fixed Stars, expanded second edition in May of last year, and her newest book, Anticia, Secrets in the Mirror, was released on August 5th, 2020. Liz is from Toledo, Ohio, and is involved with local astrology groups. A list of her books and her blog is on her website at cosmickitchenpress.com, and we'll repeat that later, but cosmic is spelled K-O-Z-M-I-C, so it's cosmickitchenpress.com. All right, Liz, welcome. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you, Sherry.
It's a pleasure to have you back on today. And
well, yeah, it's an eclipse day.
I know. Have you experienced anything yet, or not necessarily that you want to share it, but
yeah, totally Gemini stuff too. The street in front of my house got ripped up this week.
Talk about infrastructure, right?
Yeah, I'm being infrastructured, but it'll be beautiful when it's done, but noisy and messy while it's going on.
Right. Well, I noticed, as you know, that you posted recently on Facebook that Venus in Cancer squaring Chiron and Aries at this Gemini New Moon solar eclipse has certain repercussions, and I was wondering if you would share with our listeners what you make of this energy within the context of this lunation.
Sure. The Gemini eclipse at 19 Gemini has Anticias at 11 Cancer and contra Antician at 11 Capricorn. And Anticias are reflections of planetary light that are equidistant from the solstices. They're not aspects. They're a reflection of light calculated on the solstice points at 0 Cancer and 0 Capricorn. The math is ridiculously simple to do, but it's an ancient method that's kind of gotten lost in the traffic. We've had a lot of new techniques and methods that have gained traction over the past 100 years, and Anticia kind of got forgot about. But I got to tell you, I mean, they're so valuable because they tell you where all the hidden dirt is in the chart. And since Venus is very close to conjunct the eclipse Antician and will actually be conjunct that eclipse Antician in a few days, as well as squaring Chiron, to me, because Venus is women, I tend to read Chiron as gangs of lawyers and gangs of judges. So we have this big case of Jean Carroll launching the defamation suit against Donald Trump a year or so ago. And Barr's Department of Justice decided to represent Trump in that case. Now, Merrick Garland, who's the new Attorney General, has decided to continue representing him. So here's a woman, Jean Carroll, against a gang of government lawyers, which is Chiron. And so that, to me, seemed as like kind of a woman against the world sort of thing. And then we also have Kamala Harris, who is taking on some really, really rough jobs at the federal level. She's down in Nicaragua, I think, today, encouraging people not to come to the border yet because we have so many problems to resolve. And she's also apparently in charge of slowing down the raft of voter suppression laws. Not sure how she's going to do that, but that, again, is like a woman against a raft of lawyers or legislators. Chiron, yeah, it can be wounded healer, but it can also be agenda groups, but particularly lawyers and judges, because in myth, Chiron was a judge. He adjudicated disputes between the centaurs and other tribes. The other relevance of this is that Chiron is linked to indigenous tribes. And we are now seeing for the first time in history, a woman, Deb Haaland, is the Department of the Interior head, was just appointed by Biden. It's the first time a Native American has been in the cabinet. And, of course, the Department of Interior includes the Bureau of Indian Affairs. So I think that's very interesting because Chiron in Aries is what we have natally in the United States Sibley chart. Now, in the Sibley chart, it's at 20 Aries, so that return is a couple of years away. I think it's in 2025, 2026. Chiron's real slow in Aries.
Right.
But I do see that this is like, that Native Americans are getting lands returned. They're having legal successes. I think maybe you heard that the pipeline project all just got canceled. The big one out in Dakota, I think. It's a big victory for the native tribes in that area. So I think Chiron in Aries is, making it possible for natives to finally get some justice after all these centuries.
Now, what it's interesting, I just want to tell the listeners that the Chiron in Aries in the natal U.S. Sibley chart, right, is in the 4th house. So it's so interesting because when you look at that chart, in the context of what you're saying, it's like, because I always go to the wounded healer, so, but it's the wounds that were inflicted upon the indigenous people for whom the United States land, what became the United States, the land, the actual physical concrete, ground was belonged to the Native Americans. And we clearly wounded them. I finished reading a few months back a series of books by Colin Woodard, who's a American historian, and his first book was published a few years ago called The 11 Nations. I've probably mentioned it on the show before, but what an eye-opener in terms of his description. And he's a decent writer. Some of the historians are a bit more academic, but he really describes the wars perpetrated by the different settlers in different regions and the reasons for it that are pretty graphic. So when you really, like, people sort of tend to think about fights, it's a generic kind of concept to us, but if you actually thought about it in your mind's eye as what a scalping actually looks like, it's like if you witnessed a scalping, most of us would be like, ugh, that I'm going to vomit. I mean, don't ever do that again, but it went on with a lot of impunity back then. So I just want to mention that because I really think, and it also relates in my mind to the plight of slaves and African Americans for whom this was not their original birthplace, or their descendants. Of course, it was their birthplace, but their legacy is a wounded one. So I think that the square also can relate to what's been going on, obviously, for a while now in terms of Black Lives Matter and in terms of voting rights bills, because clearly they're being designed on state levels to limit the capacity of people of color and others to vote, to have the right to vote. Would you agree with that?
Well, sure, because the U.S. Sun in the Sibley chart is at 12 Cancer. So it's sitting right on the antition of this eclipse, and the U.S. Sun is square Saturn. And Saturn is a planet of limitations. It's in the 10th house. It's saying, okay, well, some people are more equal than others. And now there's this humongous fight to say, oh, wait a minute. No, I don't think so, even though those battles have been fought again and again and again. Now, this will be either the 5th or 6th Chiron return the United States has had since its foundation, because Chiron takes about 51, 52 years to go all the way around the sun. So we've had a lot of Chiron returns in the past, but those have not worked out well for indigenous people. So, I think this one is shaping up very, very differently. And in terms of the square to Neptune with this eclipse, yes, it's definitely square Neptune, but we're having a Neptune opposition, Neptune in the Sibley chart too, and the eclipse also squares the progressed U.S. sun is at 16 Pisces. So we're getting a lot of pressure on the U.S. sun, both natal and progressed, as well as this Neptune stuff. But the thing that really strikes me is that so much Uranus activity is occurring. It's just a lot, and obviously these eclipses in Sagittarius and in Gemini, the natal U.S. Uranus is at, 8 Gemini, right? So that got hit by the lunar eclipse 2 weeks ago.
Right.
So Uranus and the sun are both in the U.S. chart under a lot of pressure. And I think that gives us a feeling like we're in constant chaos. And like you keep hearing politicians say, well, this is a battle for the soul of the nation. The soul can be represented by the sun.
Right.
And so, there is this feeling of constant disruption and of, this general unhappiness throughout the country because we have to resolve who we are as a people.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Well, it's obviously a battle to make everybody equal people and not just a privileged few, and that privileged few are becoming a smaller and smaller part of the demographic. So people resent that, so they want to suppress those who are becoming a larger group demographically from exercising their voting franchise. So,
Right. And it's a change. I mean, I think also the Venus, both the square to Chiron at this lunation and the sextile to Uranus are, the change in values, like I said. I mean, do you value everyone is equal, as you just said, or not? And, if you do, what do you have to fight against? What's the internal, frustration with the square, right? Who do you want to protect? Who do you want to say, hey, we need to elevate the status of this group, like you just pointed out, with Native Americans, and I would include any other minorities, including, of course, African Americans, to, in equal status with the rest of the basically descendants of the founders of the country. It's interesting because the U.S. Sibley, I notice it's in a T square, right? It's really a T square where the sun is waxing into the square to Saturn. The sun's at 12 Cancer, Saturn's at 14 Libra, and the sun also squares and Saturn opposes the 20-degree Chiron in Aries. Now, I do use wide orbs, but, it's like and Saturn is conjoined to Juno. So there's actually at 20 Libra. So there's actually a very tight opposition between Chiron and Libra. And I think what's interesting is that during the Trump years, I just saw a headline this morning about how Biden's attending the G7 meeting in Europe and that the European allies are glad that they're happy to welcome the U.S. back into the fold, whereas we've been alienated. So this sort of like idea of which partners are we committed to, and where is that a problem for us? Where are we wounded by our partnerships? I think that's not only obvious now, but there's a lot of historical data, right, about who we backed in what war. And all the, most of us who were alive during the Reagan years and the Iran-Contra stuff, and the reason why we're having discussions about whether or not to limit immigrants in who have a legal right to apply for asylum, regardless of what this administration tells them to do, right?
Political refugees do, not immigrants, but political refugees, yes. There is an international tradition that refugees are allowed to enter, but the circumstances at the border are so bad now. They need to get that under control, and more people just places pressure on a system that's underfunded and understaffed, and they can't handle capacity. And I know things in Central America are bad, but it's tragic because I think people trying to come north to the United States for asylum are really in a position to be exploited and killed by people with bad intentions. I mean, it's kind of like saying, okay, things are bad where you're at, but it could be worse as you come north. You just be cautious, you know. And the other thing I'm seeing here, too, I'm looking at the Sibley chart, the progression. Mars has been retrograde in the U.S. progress chart for years. But right now, retrograde Mars in Libra is in opposition to retrograde Chiron in Aries in the progress chart. So this really highlights the condition of indigenous peoples and people who are of this continent, in contrast to the people who kind of aren't. And then progress Jupiter is squaring those. And progress Jupiter is stationing direct over the next couple of years. So it does seem to me like a change in the way justice is affected towards those people. That may be why finally, after all these centuries, that our Native Americans, our indigenous people, are finally getting some of the justice that they've needed for decades and decades. So that's, to me, is kind of the good side or the silver lining of it. I would also notice, and this is something very strange about the Sibley chart that doesn't get talked about a lot. You know, the sun's at 13 Cancer, and there's Jupiter and Venus at 3 and 5 Cancer. The sun is combust. I mean, those Jupiter and Venus are combust. They're hiding behind the sun's beams. So that you're looking at a group of very well-heeled, wealthy people in power that are sort of hiding behind the government.
Interesting.
It's pretty hard to get those entrenched vested interests out of the government because they are in it. They own it, right? So until we Citizens United overturned, getting big money out of political campaigns is going to be very difficult.
Well, yeah, but it's part and parcel, too, of the change in values, because over the last 10 years or 11 years since Citizens United was passed, approved by the Supreme Court, we have the fact that corporations are tantamount to individuals. So, we got a lot of issues there because their power has been strengthened in terms of how they contribute to political campaigns. That's what I'm talking about. So how are we going to have a Congress that passes legislation to put increased taxes on both corporations and wealthy individuals when some of the taxes increases are going to affect them personally? And that's the dilemma, right?
Right. And this eclipse also is very close to the U.S. Mars, because U.S. Mars is at 21 Gemini. I mean, it depends which chart you use for Declaration of Independence. I know there's a lot of different risings for that, different times that people use. But Mars is still at 21 Gemini. That's very, very close to this eclipse and to the U.S. So, yeah, with the Antisha, those two planets are tied together in the natal chart of the United States.
Well, if anybody who's listening who doesn't know or is curious, the Sibley chart that I'm talking about has a 12-degree, 21-minute Sag rising, and Mars is at 21, 22 in the 7th house in Gemini, but the chart itself is July 4th, 1776 at 5:10 p.m. in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. But it's interesting because I noticed that progress Mars, which you pointed out, is heading, to exact oppose it's between the Saturn at 14 Libra because it's at 17 Libra in the 10th house, and it's approaching conjunction to the Juno at 20 Libra, which is opposite the Chiron at 20 Aries. So it'll be interesting to see. But let me ask you a question going back to what you said before about the indigenous people.
Right, Sherry. Progress Mars is retrograde. It's actually backing up to Saturn.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. Sorry about that. Yeah. Okay. So it's retrograde. But it's still between the two. Yeah. I wonder if and when it opposed. I'd have to look. I haven't done the research. So if it was in opposition, if it was on Juno at any point, or because I don't know how long it's been retrograde and all that. All right, but to move off that topic, then you're talking about the fact that the indigenous people will start to become recognized as needing, basically, I'm going to use the word, but don't anybody jump up and down. I mean, reparations or reparation-like behavior. Do you think that portends well also for the African Americans here?
I guess because they were imported to this country originally as slaves. To me, they fall under the aegis of Saturn, because Saturn rules slaves and minorities. And again, I think that gets tied into that big T square in the U.S. Sibley chart with the and Saturn and progressed Mars and, progressed and natal Chiron. It's all tied in together because of that Sun square. And yeah, Sun is absolutely square Saturn, and it's saying, okay, well, the rich people don't want the poor people to do well. But remember, this is really the big rule of thumb here, is progressed Jupiter is at 15 Cancer. It's stationary. It's been retrograde for, who knows, 100 years by progression, and now it's about to turn direct, right? Because the Sun is trining it from Pisces, a progressed Sun. So when the Sun trines a slow planet, it goes direct or retrograde. So as we're seeing our progressed Sun move through the middle of Pisces, that means that progressed Jupiter is going to turn direct. And it's turning direct in square to Saturn and Mars and Chiron on the natal U.S. Sun. So it's like, again, Jupiter brings the truth. It brings justice. It's the benefic, It gives people what they need. And especially Jupiter exalted in Cancer. It's we have a rule of law in this country. You can't just scribble outside the lines and not have penalties. And I don't know that Native Americans need reparations so much as for the U.S. government to fulfill its promises.
Well, yeah, I use the term loosely. I didn't use it. I don't mean that they'll get paid. For example, we corresponded briefly yesterday that there was an article about a day or two ago that the Penobscot tribe up in Maine was able to buy back an island that they obviously had lived on jurisdiction over, centuries ago. So that's reparations, but
that is a issue because it's land.
Right.
So that T square between the 7th, the 4th, and the 10th houses, and these planets are all lining up over the next several years, and we're on the verge of a Uranus return in a few years, a Pluto return, a Chiron return. The United States is getting lots of returns here within the next decade. In a few years with the Pluto, right, that's 2023, 24.
Right.
So we're getting lots of come back to the original square A and check out the flaws, and check out what was going on at the beginning. Start over again and do it right this time.
Yeah, that would be nice. Now, I just progressed the Sibley chart, and I have circa July 23rd, 2025, when Jupiter stations direct. And at that point, progressed retrograde Mars will be at 16, almost 16 and a half of Libra. So there's a square potentially forming there, right? And that also, as we said, catches the Chiron in it, but also the Saturn. So yeah, really, 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 really interesting. But
it's progression, and so I think, did you say 2023?
No, 2025.
Okay, well, between now and then, the United States is getting a progressed new moon at 19 Pisces. It's very close to opposition U.S. Neptune.
Yeah.
So we're also getting that major progression. Now, Dane Rudhyar said, run the progressed new moon as a standalone chart for forecasting. Just saying.
Right, gotcha.
And that chart has a Gemini rising.
Okay. Well, I'm looking at that too, and I see it somewhere. It's either looks like it's 19 Pisces. The little Neptune, U.S. Sibley Neptune is 22 Virgo. So at 19, what else we got going? Anything? Yeah, interesting. It'll be interesting, but it's also in the third house. So that'll be interesting for sure.
The ascendant, though, so it has a fourth house relationship to the Sag rising, but it squares Mars. It's definitely in the zone there for another T-square. So the United chart is getting pommeled by these big, major T-squares in cardinal and mutable signs over the next 3 to 4 years. I think we can already see that coming.
I think it's interesting because in psychological astrology, Sun opposite Neptune has a lot to do. Both of them. It's a parental structure, right? We've got the Sun opposite Neptune, which is a idealization of the father figure and the authority figure, and the Moon is opposite Neptune is very psychic, but potentially confused. So they're in Pisces to begin with. But I mean, just off the surface, right? It would be like a new era or a new theme for the next 27 and a half years of empathy and compassion, but also the potential for self-deceit. But I think Americans are already self-deceived. I always go back to the title of a book from a century ago of, The Ugly American Abroad. Who do we think we are? There's a Geminian component here if it happens in the third house. So it's super interesting. I appreciate your pointing all this out. You're going to do a lecture on this? You definitely should.
Well, I kind of post on Facebook a lot with the mundane astrology group, so that's kind of where I'm on my soapbox. So it is, it's just that the next 3 to 4 years, the U.S. chart is getting pommeled both by transits and by these major progression lineups with multiple T-squares. And to me, T-squares are where you have to be aware of what the battle is. And I think the stage is set. We know what those battles are. It's just, how do you win them? How do we overcome the ball and chain from the past? And that's very difficult. I mean, nobody has a magic wand to make these problems go away. It requires basically the people, the first house and the fourth house, to be active in government and call your representatives, call your senators, make your opinion known. They don't really listen to you, but if they get enough calls, their assistants do write it down. They do take note of the calls coming in, and really, they don't get nearly enough calls from people. If they get thousands of calls, they'll start paying more attention. You know what I mean? People have to be active citizens. You can't sit and say, oh, well, it's just so bad, there's nothing I can do. Well, there is. You can do little things, you can do big things, but you can do something, right?
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, your vote counts. Yeah. I noticed, too, that on the date, no, I guess I rolled it ahead. I don't know how I ended up in February of 2024 that transiting Mars in the U.S. Sibley chart will be on its south node. I don't know how fleeting it'll be, but it'll play out in the fourth and the fifth houses because the Mars rules those houses in this chart. So that's just an interesting aside. Usually it's, a bit of a deficit, right, in the second house, which is finances and, how we earn our money and things like that. But it's our sense of self-esteem, of course. So, but let me go back to some of the other questions I had. I just want to go back to the Antician that you were talking about, 11 degrees Cancer Capricorn, right? What can you tell our listeners that's of practical assistance? So if they go and they look at their charts right now, look at what houses the current eclipse is falling in, what does the Antician actually tell them? If they look at 11 Cancer or Capricorn, see if they have any angles or planets or any other important points there.
Well, sure. I mean, any eclipse is going to be more or less. I regard eclipses as quantitative rather than qualitative. They're not good or bad so much as either they create a lot more happening in that area of their chart or a lot less. And particularly solar eclipses could be things that are getting eliminated or moved away. So like me, my street just got ripped out. That's less, definitely things being taken away, although it's being replaced. But it might be things that are obsolete or things that it's time to go, or, anywhere you've got that 11 Cancer Capricorn, there might be that sense of, okay, I've been living in this little headspace where everything's okay, but then everything's not okay. Because Cancer Capricorn is that sense of parenting and how we view ourselves in terms of our family and our relationships. and our safety zone, certainly with Cancer. But then the opposite area is Capricorn, is where are we kind of naked and alone in the dark, having the Frodo experience. So I think there's sort of that sign of where you're feeling really insecure, or where is your security, and is that security a good type of security, or is it just a chimera that you think it's secure but it's really not? Or what beliefs do you have that all of a sudden are being challenged in that Cancer-Capricorn axis? And I think that's true certainly of the Gemini-Sag axis. Some people are going to get hit by the actual eclipse point at 19 Gemini with planets in mutable signs, or they could get clipped by that Antition axis at 11 Cancer-Capricorn. So, you want to look at both of those axes in your personal chart and say, where are things getting eliminated? Where's my security safety zone, and is that working for me, or am I believing things that aren't serving me anymore? Because solar eclipses particularly are about what's obsolete and what we have to move on for. So if you're saying, okay, well, this is a sorrow cycle with a lot of self-empowerment and creative manifestation, I would think, okay, if what you've got isn't working for you, then you got to reinvent a little bit and look and really reinvent the areas that are wobbly or not working, because eclipses really give us a door to say, okay, this is luggage I've been carrying. I don't want to carry this luggage anymore. I'm going to go through the door and I'm going to get different luggage or better luggage, or move into a new project or a new space of life that suits me better. So like with clients, I'm seeing people getting a lot of new jobs, people that are moving into a better home. It's not negative at all. It's just saying, okay, well, this is gone or this is ending and I'm ready for something better. So in a way, these eclipses are positive, right? My street's being ripped up, which is really a pain. It's a really noisy, dirty, stinky process, right? But the end result is going to be very positive. I'll have a new street. You're going through that process of letting go of one thing, hopefully in exchange for something that is better.
Yeah, I gotcha. That's great. Well, I always say it's like with Saturn, if something leaves your life, it opens up space for something new to come in. So if something is that, like you said, outlived its purpose, that there's a purpose to its leaving, so that you can bring in something that's more relevant to your future purpose, and that's perfect. Thank you so much.
I think when Mercury goes direct, it will be trine Saturn. So I do think that's about, choosing the best of whatever options you have. Saturn implies limited options, but Mercury in Gemini is pretty clever. It can make the best of whatever options are out there, right? It might be retrograde, but it is in its own sign.
Right. Well, we have about 3 minutes left, so I want to give you the opportunity to tell everyone what you're up to lately, where they can find you, how they can contact you if they want a reading. You've got several books that I mentioned that I'm sure are on Amazon or they can buy through you, so have at it.
Sure, thank you so much. Obviously, Little Book of Fixed Stars is cranking. People are loving that book. Antisha, Secrets in the Mirror, explains how to do Antisha and how to use them. It may not be the definitive book, but at the moment, it's the only book. I also published 12-House Tarot Spreads, Uses and Variations last year, and that's doing quite well in the tarot community. And it's tarot astrology. 12-House Spreads are obviously derived from astrology. All that stuff is on my website at cosmickitchenpress.com, and the books are available. You can go straight to Amazon, but there are links in my site to get to those pages on Amazon. The Great Lakes Astrology Conference sadly got canceled this year, but I am doing various lectures for different groups this year on Zoom. So I just did a whole bunch of them, and I'll be doing, I think, more this autumn. Can't pinpoint right off the top of my head what's the next one, but I am out there giving lectures and talking to people. And if they want to contact me, they can certainly contact me through my website. So, yeah, I have been getting a lot of readings on Zoom lately because of COVID, but switching over, and then especially it's fun to actually see people's faces and work on their charts with those charts visible for both of us on the screen and having some FaceTime with clients. I love it,
Wow.
So it's all good. It's all good. We're sort of coming out of the other end of the, pandemic quarantining and starting to socialize again. Just be careful, make good decisions, be safe, get vaccinated, do good things.
Right, exactly. And it's Cosmic Kitchen Press, right? .com?
Yes, CosmicKitchenPress.com, and I'm out there. I'm on Facebook, and I'm findable.
All right, it's Elizabeth Hazel. So your stuff is a wealth of information. You are a wealth of information. So thank you, and again, thank you for stepping in quickly to join me on this show. And we'll book another interview, a couple months down the road, and I will contact you about that, assuming you are willing to come back.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks for having me again.
Sure. Thank you. And thanks to everyone else for joining us today. I hope you found the information presented here helpful as you continue your karmic evolution in this lifetime. Be sure to join me next week on June 17th for another episode of Karmic Evolutions, Astrologically Speaking, when I'll be joined once again by professional astrologer Mitchell Lewis. Till then, may your journey be filled with karmic healing and the joy of greater consciousness. Namaste.